Well, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in truly across the continent for another exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. We've got kids in Alberta, BC, Texas, Newfoundland, Rhode Island, Washington, and more today. It is a wild ride, and we're so pleased to have you all here for what is going to be a very exciting program for two big reasons. Number one, this is February. This is our entire month that since our inception in 2014, we kick out all the dudes and spend the entire month solely showcasing and celebrating the most amazing women in science and exploration on planet Earth. This week alone, we've got exoplanet hunters, astronauts, Egyptologists, conservationists galore, and I'm really excited of all the days that you've chosen to join us today. Now, I'm going to introduce our speaker in just a second, but I want to note that we do have a Kahoot today, so between our talk and our Q&A, if you want to play along with a little 4-question quiz to test your understanding, have a little bit of fun, you can pull up that game pin and do just that. And I just want to note, because we've got a lot of newbies in the audience today, that everything we do goes to YouTube and stays there forever. So if you want to check out like 4,000 past programs, if you want to share this one with your family and friends, head to our YouTube channel and do just that when we are done. Now, I'm so excited today because we are talking about one of the coolest, literally and figuratively, topics in the entire world of science and exploration, and that is drilling ice cores on top of the world. Alison is joining us from the Ice Core Lab at the University of Alberta, which is one of the coolest names for a laboratory in the world, and she's going to share a little bit about her journeys to some of the most remote and forbidding and amazing and beautiful places on this planet. The Arctic, Antarctic, high on top of the world, mountain ice core gathering, which is one of the coolest things that you can do in science on this planet. So without further ado, I'm going to zip my lip. I wore my stylistic ice core shirt today for you all, and I'm going to bring in Alison to take us away and blow our minds with her amazing work that she gets up to. So Alison, welcome to the broadcast. So nice to meet you.
What an intro. Oh my gosh, I'm re-excited about what I do.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty, I mean, even by the standards of the cool people we bring on, you get up to some really, really spectacular stuff, and I know you have a lot to share with us today, so I'm going to zip it and leave you to blow our minds. If you want to bring in your presentation, I've got your videos all queued up for when we get them ready. Alison and I got to figure out, we got to navigate the wilds of video call shenanigans before we went live today. So we're going to do a joint presentation for you together. It's going to be very fun.
Okay, well, I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you for joining me. And I am an ice core scientist, so I drill ice cores at both poles. I work in Antarctica and the Canadian high Arctic, and I also work on the top of very high mountains outside of the polar regions. And that's actually what I thought I would share with you today. I thought, I'll pick an ice core. Let's pick one of these high mountain ones. That's a more recent one I've drilled. So that'll be the basis of what I share with you. And I really wanted to start by showing you two super short, like 1 or 2 minute videos, which I was unable to figure out how to play for you myself. So Jesse's going to cue it up.
Absolutely. Do you want me to dive in with the first one? So we've got our Rolex and Perpetual Planet Mount Logan Expedition, our episode 1, Drilling in High Places. Is that our video?
That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, I will cue that up first. We'll dive in with that. And Alison, while I'm doing that, if you want to bring up your screen share, that would be fantastic. But we will dive in and get underway with this. Here we are.
I love climbing in high places, and I love drilling ice cores.
No.
Just thinking about it. There we go.
Ice cores are cylinders of ice that we drill down in ice sheets and glaciers in order to tell us something about past climate. Looking into the past allows us to predict the future. This year, me and my team went to Mount Logan, the highest peak in Canada, to drill an ice core on Logan's summit plateau. Up in the free troposphere, around 18,000 feet, it has an enormous bowl. It's 20 kilometers long with unusually deep ice for the top of a huge mountain. It's been gathering snow and not melting for close to 30,000 years. The oldest non-polar Arctic ice in the world is sitting up there. It's very close to the coast, just off the Gulf of Alaska, in the middle of the North Pacific, a very important region in terms of global oceanic circulation and atmospheric circulation. It's really important for telling us something about paleoclimate that we don't already know. The goal this year was to drill 250, 300 meter ice core and get it back safely to the Canadian Ice Core Lab. Mount Logan is notorious for its absolutely tent-burying storms, but also the latitude of the mountain makes the altitude that your body feels more extreme. The drill, which is 900 pounds, and the generator to get flown up there. But for our bodies to slowly acclimatize to work that high, we did have to climb up there. The team is really critical. They had to specialize in their field, but with a really strong high altitude mountaineering background, and that cuts out everyone except a few people. The drill engineer, who I really, really needed to get up there with me, got sick, and I thought this could totally be a game ender. But once we were all moving up and over the highest part of the climb, I was like, yeah, we're doing this. There is something so special to me about Logan. It really is the first time that everything about my background and experience and what I love came together. And a huge part of what drives me in my life is physically pushing myself in these places. And that was a requirement to drill this core.
Ah, professional detachment out the window. That is so cool. That rocked. And the production quality, my goodness.
Okay, let's just do that one since it was
little laggy. I'm so sorry for that. My computer, all our computers don't like us today. And you know what? That's the joy of exploration by the seat of your pants, is that you never know quite what's going to happen. But Alison, your pictures are going to not lag at all, and they are queued up. So feel free to dive in. If you want to drag that little StreamYard sharing your screen guy on the bottom away, that's perfect. And otherwise, we are good to go.
Okay, you just interrupt me because I can't see you. So as long as you can see my slides, we're good to go. And again, interrupt me if anything goes amiss.
Will do.
Okay, so as you can maybe tell from that little clip, I sort of have this dual background, which lets me drill ice cores in some pretty cool places. I'm an ice core scientist and trained as an ice core scientist, but I am also a high altitude mountaineer. I worked for years as a U.S. mountain guide and climbing ranger. And so these two sides of my life that I'm really passionate about, and I never quite thought, I could combine, I finally have. I drill ice cores on the top of really high mountains now. And so that's what I thought I would share with you here as a way to tell you a little bit about ice core science. Let's see, how do I click? Oh, nope, we're going to go past these. And in this particular example, I wanted to just make sure that I started off by saying that this land that I worked on for the project I'm sharing with you is all First Nations land. And I'm I'm very lucky and fortunate to be able to work on these lands that are not my own. They're the lands of the Kluane, Champagne-Natick, and White River First Nations who work hand in hand with us. And it's just a real privilege to work in these incredible and beautiful traditional territories. Okay, and so I've just got to tell you first, of course, why are we going through this business of drilling ice cores? It is very cold, very uncomfortable, very costly, uses energy itself, which is, something we're sort of trying not to do. Well, we go through the trouble because ice cores preserve the chemistry of the atmosphere and a bunch of different environmental factors over time. And they are, in fact, one of our most powerful tools for understanding past climate. And I would say the chemistry of ice cores offers a almost seemingly endless number of tools for investigating past climate. And I'm listing here just a few that are very common ones that we use ice cores for. So we can reconstruct temperature from the liquid chemistry of ice. When we melt that ice, we can get temperature information about the past out of it. We can see where wildfires occur, and we can look at changes in the past, wildfire frequency and intensity, and also by looking at sugars and other things that get trapped in the ice, changes in the vegetation that was burning. Now, we also can look at things that humans have done to the planet. So if we look at from the Industrial Revolution, just say the 1970s-ish to present, we can look at the human imprint on the planet and measure all sorts of things that we as humans have created that we use in our everyday lives, but they reach these most remote parts of the planet and the tops of the highest, most pristine mountains. And they can tell us about our imprint on the planet. And then I also listed marine productivity here, and that seems a little bit specific, but it's actually my own area of expertise in ice core science, my original area of expertise, in looking at different things in the chemistry of the ice from ice cores that are from ice sheets and from the land, but that can actually tell us about the ocean. They can tell us about sea ice conditions in the past and what the ocean surface looked like in the past. And then you're probably familiar with this too. There's not just the ice that we can turn into liquid and look at all these different things. There's also actual air bubbles that are trapped in the ice. And those are little capsules of ancient atmosphere. And we can look at the makeup of those bubbles and that will tell us things like changes, probably the most commonly you've heard of, would be our long-term records of CO2, greenhouse gases in the past. And that comes from measuring the makeup of those little trapped bubbles in ice cores. Now, this example I wanted to use to kind of walk you through the power of ice cores and telling us about past climate is from Mount Logan, which is the highest peak in Canada. It's the second tallest peak to Denali in North America, almost the same exact altitude. And it's located in the St. Elias in the Yukon, which is actually the largest non-polar ice field in the world. And when you're there, it actually feels quite polar. It's just, it's very vast and very cold, very stormy, because it's where you see that red arrow pointing, it's right on the coast. So it gets an enormous number of storms. It just gets hit from the west through the Gulf of Alaska. And it's worth mentioning that, okay, why can't we just drill one ice core and we're done with it? Or just drill in the polar regions and we're done with it? Ice cores contain global climate information, but they also have this incredible ability to tell us something more local and regional. And this, of course, is dependent on where the ice core is sitting on the planet. And so our longest records come from the Arctic and the Antarctic, where it's been sort of cold and frozen for the longest periods of time. But if we only drilled in the polar regions, that means we lack a lot of climate information from the non-polar regions, which is where most people live. So records outside of the polar regions that would last a long time have to be in places that are super high and super cold. And Logan is one of them. It's just shy of 6,000 meters. It has the largest base circumference of any non-volcanic mountain on Earth. So it's just massive. I can tell you that from having climbed it a few times. And it has a 20-kilometer long summit plateau. And we've long known that Logan, with this is what the summit plateau looks like up here, with its enormous cold high plateau, may contain really long records of climate variability in the past from this North Pacific region. That, for example, in Arctic or in Antarctic, ice core couldn't tell us. It's kind of a huge bowl of ice sitting up really, really high. And so the primary goal of this project, we kind of have primary scientific targets for each core and location and that we're going. And in this case, the primary goal really was to navigate very challenging conditions, as you can probably tell because of the altitude, to extract this high mountain ice core and to look at long-term climate variability in the North Pacific region. And so we actually had to do this over 2 years, which is common. We kind of have a reconnaissance year. I'll show you some photos of what it looked like, and this is the start of the reconnaissance year, where we locate the ice coring site, where we install weather stations like I'm doing here. And then we do the drilling in a next year. So this is common, that it takes us 2 years. So these photos here are from May in 2021. My climbing partner, Rebecca, there in the yellow, and I climbed Logan to install this weather station, which is sitting at a very inhospitable spot that I don't really enjoy, called Prospector's Call. It's at 18,500 feet. And this is the highest weather station in North America. And there's I can share it with you after. There's a website where you can look at the real-time data and the terrible, awful conditions at that spot at any time. And this weather station has really helped to raise the roof of human observational networks, because we lack meteorological data from high mountain environments, which actually in many cases are located in places that are warming the fastest. And so here's a few more photos from that first year, where we're installing the weather station there. On the top left, On the top right, you're looking at the actual summit of Mount Logan. Rebecca and I coming off the summit, we remeasured the height with some friends that year to see if it had actually changed from when it was originally measured. And then the bottom two are just part of the route. Those are some pictures from the route up to where we drilled this ice core. Now, the radar survey, which is what you're looking at here on the top, or pulling this funny sled with these funny things in it around, that helps us narrow down the ideal ice coring location. And what it does is it sends a signal out from, well, if you look at the top right there, basically from the instrument in one side, it sends it down, and then it reflects off internal layers. It reflects off the bedrock at the bottom of the ice. And then that signal comes back and it's received by the instrument that's in the second sled. And this lets us look at the layering from your feet or your skis all the way down to the bedrock at the very base and everything in between. So you can see if there's really nice layering or if it's disturbed, how thick the layers look, if you can actually kind of follow them. And again, this kind of can take a while. You drag this thing around in a grid, doing this survey, looking at the layering, and then you have to process all this data and figure out where you want to core. Here's a quick look at the climb up over Prospector Col where this weather station is, which actually is what gives Logan its somewhat unique feature of having to go up to get down. So where I'm walking here along this ridge at 18,500 feet, you can see it drops off on both sides, which means that you go up and over and down to the summit plateau from this point. So actually down to the drill site. And this is actually quite important just from a more human aspect of this kind of work, because if you have any issues with altitude, which is common at altitudes like this, you have to go up to get down. So it's very sort of committing. The crux of this whole route is where Rebecca and I are walking slowly up here, called the King Col Icefall. And this is an area it's about halfway up in altitude up the mountain. It used to be very stable, and also it sort of didn't flow as fast as it does now. But the icefall, because of warming during at the lower parts of this mountain, warming has actually caused an increase in how fast this icefall is moving, which has caused it to thin, and it's actually quite mobile now. So when I went up it not this year, but the one before, my route up ended up being very different from my route down, which means that it is really on the move. This is my very minimalist ice core drill camp. This is what it looks like. And so maybe if you've seen pictures of polar setups, that actually looks more like a city of tents. In this case, you got to go with as little as you possibly can. So on the bottom, you see 3 tents. One is a drill tent, one is a kitchen tent, and then another is just kind of a hangout and bad weather tent. And then at the top of the screen, there's 4 tents. Those are simply sleeping tents. We slept in those, and none of these are heated. I'm not that kind, I guess. Maybe consider going into the field with me. And then people always ask this. There's one tent right in the middle. It's kind of reddish, and that is our toilet. Also very uncomfortable. It's actually an ice fishing tent. It's got no floor, and there's just a bucket in it. Someone always asks. So that's the entire camp that we lived in for weeks. Now in this case, because we're drilling up at altitude, it's quite high. It's kind of hard to eat, hard to sleep. No one feels that great. We wanted to do it as fast as we can. This is what it looks like inside of a drill tent. You can see it says Eclipse Ice Drill, and myself and engineer here, Etienne, are operating the drill. And so we stick it under this floorless tent so that we can continue drilling in bad weather. And we split ourselves into 2 drill shifts. At this point in the season, there were only 4 of us left. So 2 people and 2 people, which kind of let us run the drill as many hours as we possibly could so that we could get down from there as fast as we possibly could. Here's a picture kind of in a storm of what it looked like from the outside. Doesn't look like much, but there's a lot going on the inside there with the drilling. And here's another shot of just kind of looking down the drill trench. This whole drill swings up and down from its drilling position, which it's in now, its vertical position, to its ice core retrieving position, so that you can actually pull the ice out of the barrel and package it up. And so as we're drilling, it gets a little bit monotonous, but the cool thing I always remember is as you drill down, you're going farther back in time. The deeper you go, the farther back in time you go. And as we're drilling, we don't know exactly where we are in time, although we get some clues as we go. Sometimes you can see volcanic layers, and we might have a guess as to what eruption it was, things like that. And as you can imagine, for this particular scientific expedition, altitude was a real major factor to overcome. So you saw those ice core boxes that are kind of piling up on the surface. And what we did was every time there was good weather, a helicopter would come in and hover above us, drop down a line, and take out what's called a sling load of ice. It would take it out every time we had a full load of 300 pounds, which was the maximum that it could carry at that kind of altitude. And the reason for doing this is because if we waited with what ended up being over 1 ton of ice till the very end of the season, we could have been stuck up there for weeks more, waiting for all the ice to be flown off. Here's us skiing off. So it took us 9 days to climb to the ice core drill site. It took us almost 2 weeks up there, staying up there at altitude to drill. And then this is the start of the descent, which someone also always asks this. It took 9 hours, 9 hours to ski from summit to base. Or maybe it was 7. I think it was actually 7. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to say, well, why does this really matter? You know, why focus on these high mountain regions outside of what I already said? Well, places like Logan Summit Plateau, you know, they're seemingly untouched by anything, including warming. I mean, look at them. But even the highest points on Earth are impacted by climate change. And not only this, I alluded to it earlier, but many of these high mountain regions are actually warming at a faster rate than lower elevations. And this is due to a process called elevation-dependent warming. And this kind of highlights the importance of climate records that come from high mountain regions, despite the fact that they cover much shorter time periods often. And just a last note to say that kind of this example I shared with you today, I'm one person sharing an enormous number of people and institutions' work. This is very much not a one-person show. It takes a lot of people to do something like this, a really strong team and wonderful supporters. So I look forward to answering your questions, and thanks for following along.
Awesome. Thank you, Alison. And if you want to come out of screen share, I know you're set up means you can't see us, so feel free to exit that and we'll have a bit of a conversation.
There we go.
What a wild ride and what a wild adventure. Well, before we dive in with Q&A with our Room 16 folks and all our friends on YouTube, we are going to do our Kahoot together first. So for those who are new to this, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what you win is Alison and I's everlasting respect. So no, don't spit up. We haven't had a spit up in the history of exploring by the seat of your pants. You could have been the first. We were so close. So we're going to dive in with this. This is just 4 quick questions. Test your understanding. Have a little bit of fun. And if you don't want to sign in or it's difficult to get individual devices, just yell out the answer in your class. Some of these directly pertain to what we talked about. Some were drawn from Alison's broader expeditions in her life, which I encourage you to check out on her Instagram page and more when we're done. But we are going to dive in and get underway with this. And Alison, if you want to give us hints for any of these, because it's been your life, you are welcome to. I bet you're the expert. Ooh. And then we'll dive in with our Room 16 folks for our first question. All right. 3, 2, 1, and we will dive in with question number 1. All right. Oh, man, my computer's slow. Doesn't like me. It's not even showing me what question 1 is. You're probably already into it, but I'm somewhere else. There we go. What's the main reason we collect ice cores? To see how far down the water is, to understand past climates, to test out drill bits, that would be fun, or to sell to drink manufacturers, which not incidentally would be a great way of funding future expeditions, probably, just so you know. Oh, we didn't get anyone. So understand past climates is, of course, our answer, and that might have been because my Kahoot's a little iffy and doesn't like me right now. But we're going to go to question 2. Everything's Alison, you've hit the world's most like things that have gone slightly awry in a video broadcast that I've had in some time, which is kind of exciting for me. So, all right. Long ice cores allow us to look back how far into the past? 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, or over 1,000,000 years? That seems like a lot. I don't know.
I didn't give this answer, and it's changed recently.
It has. I was just going to say, to my knowledge, the longest ice core ever was recently found. Yeah. So a lot of people thought 100 years. No, over 1 million years is our correct answer, which is wild.
Isn't that
it's
wild? 1 million
wild.
years that ice has been on this planet without melting.
Truly. And the fact that we can collect it all and know that and use sort of cutting edge science to understand more about that is super, super cool. So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So not in the mountains, but Alison has worked in the Arctic quite a bit in her career. And does she run into penguins up there? I always like doing this when we have anyone who's Arctic or Antarctic both and doing the penguin polar bear dichotomy. So what do we think? Alison, are you surrounded by penguins when you're up in the mountains or on the Arctic ice sheet, Ellesmere Island, maybe in the past? I don't know. A little iffy. So away, and most of our, so 60% of you got this right. So polar bears are in the north and penguins are in the south. They never meet. It would be very odd if they met. The polar bears would win that battle. What that does to our leaderboard. Eager elephants in the lead. We go to our final question. So you climb mountains for fun. Where have you been around the world? The Andes, the Himalayas, Alaskan peaks, or all of the above and more? Because you just can't stop. There's just so many mountains out there to explore and discover. I must say,
I didn't give this away either, but I hope it's obvious.
We just took everything from your whole life before. It's very exciting. And this encourages, and everyone got this right.
Yay!
You everywhere. Right on, everybody.
You just can't stop.
I've been up some very small mountains in my life, and mountain climbing is one of the great joys ever. And the fact that you get to do multi-week expeditions with a bucket as your friend in a little tent on Mount Logan is pretty special. All right, Eager Elephant is our winner. If you are those folks, let us know who you are in the chat. That's fantastic.
Yay!
And we're going to dive in with some questions. So room 16, you can put on your thinking caps. We're going to come to you in a second. We've got some great questions already on YouTube. So Alexis wants to know, how did your interest in ice core chemistry start, and what advice or words would you give to students interested in doing the same work? That's a big question.
Thank you for that wonderful question. You know, I have to say my interest originally came just from loving these places so much. It's like a little bit of a chicken and egg question, but I knew I liked earth science, and I definitely knew I liked glaciers, but I worked as a climbing ranger and as a mountain guide on some of the highest mountains in the world and big mountain ranges before I decided, you know what, I'm noticing changes in these places I love, and I want to go back to graduate school and really study them and learn to understand them better. So I think what drove me back to kind of academics and this ice core science career was my love of these places. Yeah. And the second half of your question is super important. I think, you know, one thing I would say is if you can dream it, you can do it. And it does sound a little bit kind of trite, but I guess I didn't see people doing exactly what I do when I was younger. And it took me a really long time to figure out how to kind of combine my passions in a way, because I didn't have an example. But if you know the things you love that you're passionate about, I mean, whether it's within science or a different field, you can creatively combine the things that you love. And I find that's just the most gratifying kind of work. And everybody, no matter your background, no matter who you are, can be in any of these places. And actually, one other thing I was just thinking as I was talking is, don't be shy about reaching out to people who are doing things that you think you might like to do. I get emails a lot now that I talk to lots of people, wonderful people like you, and I respond to every single one. And I think that's just another thing to always remember, that don't be shy to reach out to someone doing what you think you might want to do.
I love that you added this, because almost everyone this month has shared that first message. And that's so important. It's been so nice to see as a unifying theme over this epic month of women in STEM. But the reach out to people, like so many of the people who have accomplished these amazing careers, people like you started with, hey, I love something. I'm going to find the expert. I'm going to find a person who can help. And honestly, like 99 times out of 100, people are so excited to receive messages like that. They're so keen to do things with them and work with you and help you learn more. And so don't ever hate to do that. That's such a special message. Thank you, Alison.
Yeah.
Room 16, folks, I want to head to you live. Come on in, unmute your mic, and you can take us away with our first live question. Hello, folks. Hi, guys. Hello. Do you have any questions for Alison today? What do we think?
So, how cold was the mountains?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. So we've got with and without wind chill. I think the coldest temperature, which it was hovering around much of the time up there on the summit plateau, was close to -40, which is where Celsius and Fahrenheit scales cross each other. If you add wind chill, though, and it is often incredibly windy up there, boo, colder than that. Mid-40s, something like that.
Beautiful.
It's pretty cold.
That's the temperature for our audience now. I think a lot of our audience today, we got a lot of Canadians, so you guys know how cold that can be. But that's where if you like throw boiling water in the air, it freezes and turns to snow before it hits the ground, which is a special, special temperature. Your eyebrows instantly freeze and get like big icicles. You look really cool.
Exactly.
Great question, guys. All right. Miss Coburn's class, our virtual school in Hamilton, they want to know, how did you receive all your heavy equipment? You showed this great video of a helicopter bringing something in, but is that how you got everything? How does that even work logistically?
Great question, and I shouldn't have breezed over that because I'm not that strong. So when we had to climb there to acclimatize, right? You can't fly to almost 20,000 feet because your body has to slowly get used to that lack of oxygen, and that's why we didn't just fly to where the drill site was. But when you climb from about 10,000 feet to about 20,000 feet, I start with about my body weight. I start with about 115 pounds, something like that. And you can't really take more. The drill weighs 900 pounds. The generator is 300 something pounds. Then there's fuel. And so obviously, like we just acted as a normal mountaineering expedition for that first 9 days, unable to bring the drill and the drill equipment. So we did rely on the Yukon's only high altitude modified helicopter with a pilot on oxygen. And so these high altitude logistics are this is pretty extreme. I actually, this was the most logistically complex project that I've led to date. And your question gets at basically at why. So once we got up to the summit plateau, I use a satellite phone and call the helicopter pilot. And the payload, so the maximum weight that a helicopter can even carry because of the lack of oxygen, the thin air, is 300 pounds. That's really small. So the drill alone, we broke into 300-pound loads. That was 3 shuttles of this helicopter sling loads up there. The generator, like I said, was its own sling load. And we had all those ice core boxes, and then a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff we needed to stay up there for about 2 weeks. And again, helicopters don't like to land. It's very hard to take back off. So this was essentially all done by them hovering and dropping a line with a sling, a net of this equipment on the surface. And it's also how all the ice got off. It was a ton of ice, right? So the same thing.
I've never heard of a helicopter pilot needing oxygen before, but that is exactly what you have at 20,000 feet. That's wild. Alison, you buried the lead in there. Did you say that you were carrying 115 pounds?
I buried the lead.
On the pack?
I usually start with, between my backpack and the sled, I use like 60% of my load in the sled, usually 40% on me. Yeah. But it's typical to start with about your body weight. Well, at least for me, who I'm a bit smaller of a person.
At least for you. Sorry, I want to, for our audience's sake, so I've been on one expedition in my whole life, and I'm 170, and I had to carry a 50-pound pack, and it was the most exhausting, unbelievably strenuous thing I'd ever done in my life, ever.
But did you have a sled?
No, doesn't matter. So I didn't climb a mountain. Anyway, point is, Alison is like way fitter than all of us put together. Kids, I want you to imagine having another student in your class on your back as you climb up a mountain in like -40, and that gives some semblance of an understanding. Sure. Wow. You talked about being a mountain guide, and every time we teach your mountain guides, I like to highlight this. What does it take to be a mountain guide? What kind of training is that like? And what are you learning as you're getting that certification?
Oh, well, my background's unique. I think because I started as a climbing ranger in the U.S. National Park Service. So I was a climbing ranger when I was very young in the Olympic Mountains in Washington State. And then I was the roving climbing ranger in the North Cascades. And that came before I started guiding on Denali and Aconcagua and these big peaks. And I think that's actually pretty unusual. It wasn't really that I knew I wanted to guide. I was kind of just trying it out. But my sort of all of my credentials and my safety training and my skills came from my years as a ranger in the U.S. National Park Service.
Amazing.
Yeah, and that, again, that's not kind of a common path, but after that came my dabbling in guiding, which I really enjoyed. The aspect I think that called to me most and was why I wanted to try it out is that I loved kind of assisting people in getting to places that they really wanted to experience that maybe they just couldn't on their own yet.
Alison, again, you're a master of humility in this, but for our audience's sake, you mentioned two mountains that you dabbled in guiding at, which are Denali and Aconcagua. So the tallest mountain in North America and the tallest mountain in South America. That's where Alison went to go guide. Not like normal mountains, not like 99% of them. The biggest of the biggest. And you've led numerous first expeditions, like you've gone places with people for the first time ever, which is really exciting. And before we head back to our room 16, folks, could you tell us a little bit about Girls on Ice? Because I love to highlight this, and we've got some folks in our audience today that might, in theory, get to go on one of these in the future.
Thank you for asking. I was going to find some way to tell you about it. Girls on Ice Canada is a Canadian-based program that myself and two other Canadian women started several years ago, and it's based on the original Alaska program, Girls on Ice. Our program here in Canada is a completely free 2-week scientific expedition. And it is for female identifying high schoolers, 16 and 17 years old. And we have run a program, I don't know if anyone knows this area, but in the Revelstoke, British Columbia area out of Rogers Pass. And the idea really is that there's kind of a science drive and there's also a mountaineering drive. So this speaks to my own personal background, but you have this physical goal, right? There's a summit in there. And usually it tends to be the hardest, by far the hardest sort of physical test that a lot of these students have ever tried to do. But then there's also the scientific component. So you develop a science project during the 2 weeks, and then that culminates in presenting that science to a friendly audience in the front country at the end of the program. And it's really just about increasing diversity in STEM, but in all fields, and because we know that diverse groups do better science.
Fantastic. Well, we are going to pass that along to not only our entire registered group for today's program, but we'll highlight this to all our high school classes in our network. So hopefully we get a few more applicants for you, because what an exciting and special program.
Thank you.
Room 16, I want to head back to you guys for one other live question for us, and then we'll take one more after that, because time flies and you're having fun, and we are nearing the end of the broadcast, Alison. But our Room 16 folks, come on in, unmute if you've got a second query for us, and take us away. Hey, folks, welcome in. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Do you have a set? Yep, give it. Second question for us. Come on up.
Yes.
Hi.
How are mountains made?
Ooh, yes.
How are mountains made?
Oh my gosh. I'm not a geologist. Oh my goodness. Well, okay, I don't know if you've talked about plate tectonics yet. The most basic answer I can give, which is how most mountain ranges are made, although that's not always the case. You know, some mountains are volcanoes, although that still depends on plate tectonics. But most mountains ranges are made by the crashing together of two different earth plates, right? And so different things can happen when they come together. They can come together and push up. And this is kind of the Himalayan example, right? And then you get huge peaks as plates come together and those mountains are formed. But other places, actually closer to where Logan is, like on the west coast of North America, you can get a plate that goes they hit each other, but one decides to go underneath the other. And then down here, when this one's melting, that's where you can get like the Hawaiian Islands, for example. You can get island chains there that create mountains due to that subduction. But in all these instances, it mostly has to do with how these tectonic plates are interacting with one another.
Yeah.
Ooh, that tested me.
It does, and it's one of the coolest questions in all of science. The fact that we know how mountains
Was I right?
Oh yeah, you're dead on. Of course.
Just kidding.
That's funny. Alison, this has been so much fun. I can't encourage our classrooms enough. Check out Girls in Ice Canada. Check out your amazing Instagram page. If you want to see the second video without buffering issues, you can check it out there, and I'll pass this along to all our classes. Before we bring in our classes, say a big thank you and farewell, and all our YouTube classes scream and yell at home and annoy the principal. Is there anything you want to leave us with about the work you do, or like a favorite part of your job you want to end off our broadcast with before we say goodbye?
As long as you know that I actually mean this for real. One of my very favorite things is doing things like this. I used to just do science, and now I think I spend as much time communicating my science and talking to people about it, and especially kids. This is one of my favorite things. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming in. It's been such a wild ride, and please do stick around after we're done the broadcast for just a minute, but I'm going to bring in our room 16 folks to say a big thank you and farewell. Have a wonderful day, guys, and at home, wherever you're tuning in from, thank you so much. Bye for now, everyone. See you soon. Farewell.